No way, Jose.
The following footage proves beyond any doubt that the tanks intentionally set the house on fire. It proves that the Branch Davidians were murdered. You can see that this tank has a gas jet on the front that shoots fire. You can also see the fire quite plainly. The tank goes into the house twice, and each time as it backs out, the fire at the gas jet is plainly visible.
We must all do more to recognize and look for the early warning signals that deeply troubled young people send.
Hey guys, it's Jose Galison. You're watching No Way Jose. You can find this on the No Way Jose YouTube channel, all the major audio podcatchers, and Rumble as well. Today my guest is Eric Brakey, a returning guest, but it's been a hot minute. This is former state senator of Maine, which for those who know the deep lore of me, that's my original home state, so it's kind of cool. It's nifty having him on. I think he's, I think of the only actual politician. Maybe there's another politician that I've actually had on the show before, but maybe it'll come back to me later. But it's the only one I can think of, and from my home state, so that's cool. But I do want to remind you guys how this typically works. Obviously, you guys know I'm now doing my live Already Dead show that I'm hosting on No Way Jose, so that's live. But the rest of my content, usually you have a paywall of about a week. So if you're going to get content early, it's patreon.com/NoWayJose2020. The lowest level is $2 to get that early stuff. And there's varying levels that give you different perks. And the highest levels, my sponsors, I read them off every episode. I have my co-host Toad on Tower Gang. Then I also have at Abrogate D's. Then Kevin B. Clark, a full-time guitarist and private music teacher in the New York area. Then at ZOVERACK. Then at _Infinite Zeal. Then Jacob Daniel of the Biblical Anarchy podcast. You can follow him at Biblical Anarchy. Then Tim Tuttle at Jolly on Klebold. He's who I get a lot of these edits from that I use for these various episodes. And also, I got the other one. I got my buddy Will Bell of Rabbit Eye Wine. I can't promote this because I'm telling you guys, you don't want it. He sent me like a case, and I finished him in an embarrassingly short amount of time. Made me feel like an alcoholic, and I don't really drink that much. They're just really that good. So I don't know, buy with caution, I guess. But with that, let's go ahead and get our guest in here. Hey Eric, how you doing? Glad to have you back. It's been a while.
Hey Jose. Yeah. All right, that rolls off the tongue. It's good to see you. It has been a little while. I think it was. Let's see. It must have been 2021, maybe, when we spoke. And your show's been. You've been doing some cool stuff. You were telling me you've been on Timcast a few times and interviewing some cool people. So,
yeah, I've been pretty blessed. It's pretty surreal, a lot of stuff I've done. For example, I don't know how much you followed. Probably the thing I've been most well known for, or the most stories, like Terrence Hickey, and it was really cool. It was really surreal. Within the past year, being able to interview his widow, who hadn't talked to anyone in like over 20 years. So I don't know, definitely had some unique opportunities pop up in the time that I've seen you, and I know your life's changed a little bit since I last talked. I don't believe you were. I don't recall if you were a senator at the time or not, or if you were in like kind of like a break or what the deal is. But I know you've definitely kind of stepped back away from that these days. So I'm just kind of curious, what are you working on these days? Sounds like you've stepped into the agora, where you're no longer, I guess, explicitly using political action as opposed to using other means. Although I guess you're still kind of involved with the Defend the Guard, so I guess you're kind of doing that too. But whatever, but it's still good for a good cause. Just kind of interesting that I know your life has kind of taken it on a different phase at this point. I just kind of interested to see what's going on with that.
Yeah, I've been on the ballot in the state of Maine for every election cycle, the last 5 cycles, so since 2014. And I am still a Maine state senator, but my term's coming to a close.
Oh.
Plus, the legislative business is done for the year. There's still a few minor
Okay.
responsibilities throughout the remainder of the year, but I'm not running for reelection. So after 3 terms, I decided that um, that's 10 years of my life in direct politics is kind of, you know, it's been long enough, at least for a little while. I needed a break, and this great opportunity opened up to lead the Free State Project, which I'm the new incoming executive director for. And for those who don't know, the Free State Project, it's been around for about 20 years in the state of New Hampshire. It's an organization whose mission is to get libertarians to move to New Hampshire and to build a liberty homeland where we may be wherever we come from as libertarians, where we may be a small minority of whatever state we're in. You know, it could be really bad, like California, where it's just statism all around you. Or anyway, but wherever you are in the country, libertarians are like 1 to 5%. And that's not enough to make a significant difference if you're just looking at pure kind of electoral politics, or even just trying to have a significant impact on the culture. So in New Hampshire with the Free State Project, the idea is, what if we get libertarians to concentrate in one place, a place with already a strong libertarian spirit, the live free or die state, and let's have a free state. Let's build a homeland for people who love liberty. And New Hampshire, I think, as the Free State Project has been going on for the last 20 years, New Hampshire is holding strong as the #1 state for freedom in America in a recent survey of states called Freedom in the 50 States, when you account for both economic and personal freedom. So I'm looking forward to going to New Hampshire and joining all the good people there who are building a homeland for liberty. And Jose, I know I didn't realize that you were from Maine originally.
Yeah.
Um, what part of Maine are you from?
I used to go to school in Bangor, but
Oh, okay.
I lived in an area called like Dover Foxcroft, technically Sebec, but that was like such a tiny township that I never even mentioned it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I lived out in the sticks in Maine.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a
So
lot of the best people come from the sticks of Maine.
yeah, yeah, great
Uh,
people, really, really are salt of
yeah,
the earth.
yeah. It's a real shame that in Maine right now, just politically, the state's being dominated by
Mm,
the you know by Portland and the coast. And
yeah,
a lot of the people, I think, living in the rural parts of the state that still have very much kind of a frontier attitude are just getting um, they were just being politically dominated
yep.
by progressivism, and the state's taken a really strong left turn. But I think that's ultimately why a lot of people are I think where people are experiencing this all across the country in various places. I mean, you got right now in what is it in Oregon, you've got like the eastern side of Oregon trying to secede and join Idaho. Rural people trying to get away from kind of this uh, progressive domination of the politics in their state. And you know moving to New Hampshire is always a good option for anyone who wants to live free.
Yeah, it's up in there in New England. It's like a hop, skip, and a jump away. So
I,
not as big of a deal. Sorry, go ahead.
I, have you spent much time in New Hampshire?
I mean, I think I had some family that was lived in New Hampshire. I mean, not like a ton, but like, I mean, I live in Florida now, and so it's like how like Florida is like damn near the length of New England. So
Yeah.
it's like how it is in New England. It's like what's really the difference between New Hampshire and Vermont? Like, like what, a few hundred miles? Like, so they're very similar. I mean, do have distinct cultures, obviously, and then obviously the
Yeah,
politics
and the
differ.
politics are very different.
Yeah, so I feel like if you know a New Englander, you know New Hampshire. Like, really, like I don't know. At least if you know New England, you know New Hampshire. That's my opinion. Especially if you're like with no Maine, because it's like on on the bottom of Maine. It's like right there. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Well, have you ever been up to the Porcupine Freedom Festival?
I have not. I need to. I'm at the spot right now to where I'm so busy, and I've gotten my show to where I'm like at the size to where I'm like, all right, if you want me to come to one of these events, like at least like cover something, or I don't know, like because it's like there's too many events. I have not enough time, but I would like to. But it's a haul for me. So it's
Yeah.
like I don't know. Tell those guys to pay me, and maybe I'll come. I don't know how that works. I know sometimes they have people come up. I don't think I'm quite big enough for them to pay me. But the goal is to get there. I'm not sure.
We do have a podcast studio set up for
There you go.
podcasters who are coming up, but you should really at least one of these years. It's like the Libertarian Burning Man. It's
Yeah.
something you got to experience at least once, and even if you can't make it this year, I'll let your audience know that there are tickets on sale right now at porkfest.com.
Yeah, I would. I mean, I just there's so many events. I have I have a job. You know, like I live on the other side of the country. I have kids.
Yeah, I get
I,
that.
there's a lot of there's a lot of other
There-
stuff going on. But
there's a ton-
if it was in my own state, I'd be going. So like I usually go to like when there's a libertarian convention nearby to me. I'll usually go to something like that or
yeah.
some sort of event.
Do you
But
like
yeah.
Do you like Florida?
Oh, I love Florida. It's pretty good. I mean. I guess you'll find things to complain about. I'm not a big fan of the weather overall. Like, I know it's a weird thing to complain about. But I lived in Maine up until halfway through high school. Then I moved to Tennessee, and then I joined the military right out of high school. And then I got stationed in Florida. I've been here ever since. But yeah, the Tennessee was a sweet spot weather-wise. Like that is a gray area weather. Maine is way too cold. I'm like, I don't know, maybe you'll disagree because you got used to it. And don't get me wrong, my family was Maine through and through generations. Like, so I am built for that. But it's like, but why would I want to suffer? So Tennessee is kind of for me. It's because me coming from Maine, having those genetics. Florida is insufferable during the summer. I hate it.
Yeah.
So that's just me. I don't know. Maybe you'd be the same place since you've been a Mainer your entire life. I don't know.
Well, I just know I tend to end up in Florida in the summers because I find that it's the only time you can afford a Florida vacation.
You stay
When
in Maine in the winter and Florida in the summer. You just like the torture.
Well, hey, it's cheaper in the summer for good reason. Nobody's coming down.
Yeah, it's ungodly hot. So I'm assuming you're moving to New Hampshire soon. I mean, do you have any weird thoughts about that? I mean, I don't know how much that really matters because, like I said, it is a different feeling. I feel like
Yeah.
especially I mentioned like Florida. When you get down to these like southern states, there's far more individualized state pride. But I feel like once you get to New England, it becomes more like a homogenized like New England pride kind of. I mean, you have some small rivalries like Boston, New York, stuff like that. But I don't feel like it's too intense. I mean, there is, especially major cities. I guess it's more focused on cities. So I don't know, like, if there's any weird feelings about this for you or not really.
Well, I mean, I guess I would push that. That's not how I understand kind of
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been there since high school. That's
yeah,
just been
like
my feelings, my impression as a kid. So I just didn't know if there's and you had any sentiments or just
well,
felt certain ways about this move. I don't know. I mean, you were Maine
no,
your whole life. It was a big deal when I moved from Maine to
oh
Tennessee. I
yeah,
was moving to the South. So it was like big culture shock. So, I mean, but you're moving a state. So I don't know.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just
No,
interested
no,
about
no.
how that you're processing this move.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. I think it is a thoughtful question. No, I'm just saying I know that like one of the things that I love about Maine is the really strong sense of a Maine identity. There's the saying in Maine that like if you were born, on the bridge passing from New Hampshire into Maine, but you weren't quite across the border yet, then you're not a Mainer, right? There's a real strong a Maine identity and a real strong pride in Maine, and that's why frankly it is very hard for me and painful for me to see just kind of what's happened to the state of Maine over the last half decade, with the governor who's in charge right now, Democrat Janet Mills, and she, when she took over and the Democratic Party took over the entire legislature, that is right as we were going into COVID. We had some of the strictest lockdowns. We had kids, kicked out of school, and we're still dealing with all the consequences of that. And there is a real refusal by those in power to look back at the mistakes that were made and try to learn any lessons from it. And now we have gun control that's passing in the state of Maine. We were always a state that, even when Democrats were in charge, it was you didn't touch people's guns. The taxes.
Strong identity of guns in Maine. I can guarantee that.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. But
Yeah.
that's eroding. Maybe the strong sense of importance around the Second Amendment among many is not eroding, but just the southern part of the state, what we often disaffectionately refer to as northern Massachusetts, is very much becoming politically dominant. And I half joke that probably the best path for freedom for the people of kind of the second district of Maine, the northern congressional district, is to just break away at this point and join New Hampshire, like those in eastern Oregon are trying to do with Idaho. But I mean, more to your original question, it is kind of tough. It's tough to leave behind communities that I've served for in various varying capacities for the last decade. Have a lot of strong relationships that I build with my constituents. But ultimately, one, I think I've gotten to a point where if I want to have a family and I want to kind of, at the age of 35, I feel a little bit like I'm running out of time. And me and my wife are ready to kind of explore those things. Then, it didn't feel like something that I could do anymore, just kind of like churning away in the state legislature. And this will be an exciting new opportunity with the Free State Project. I think that what's going on in New Hampshire is really the establishment of this Liberty Homeland means, no matter how bad things get in other parts of the country, folks who love liberty know that when the going gets tough and it's time to look around and say, we can't live here anymore, that New Hampshire is going to be there, and we're going to be ready to. We want to welcome all libertarians, and furthermore, the policies that are being passed in like the New Hampshire state legislature, because you have this strong concentration of libertarians in the state, you have nearly a quarter of the New Hampshire House of Representatives that are effectively, they're libertarians. They run as Republicans, but they're libertarians. And now you see school choice passing into law. You have one of the first legislative bodies to pass Defend the Guard. We're eliminating all kinds of taxes. I mean, New Hampshire really is kind of becoming a model state, a place where you can actually pass cutting edge liberty legislation that can then be an example for the rest of the country. So I'm pretty excited about it. It's a bittersweet transition to go from one place you love and into a new community, but people have been so welcoming in New Hampshire, and frankly, it makes me nostalgic for the Ron Paul days, because when I show up there and I see like there's a liberty event going on literally every single day, it's like the Ron Paul campaign never ended in New Hampshire. They just kept going.
Yeah, that's cool. No, I actually completely agree with your internal equation there. I think family comes first, and I think anyone who, I mean, there is something I think to having like identity of a regional identity. I do think that is, there's something beautiful about that, and maybe useful in a lot of ways. But at the end of the day, your first loyalty should be to yourself and your family. And so if the land around you or the conditions aren't behooving you're thriving, it's like at some point you gotta make that call. I mean, if you don't think there's some way to rectify it, you gotta kind of cut your losses and not just keep committing to a same thing. But with some of the stuff you mentioned about Maine, I did want to dig into a little bit because I'm kind of just curious how that worked out, because I'm recollecting my time in Maine as a kid, and I was very country. I remember, like I said, strong sense of identity with guns. Like, I just remember I'd go over to my dad's, every now and then, and we'd go just like literally go drive a couple miles, find some landfill, and just go, just shoot a bunch of guns. And like, we were hunting all the time, and like just very salt of the earth. Because I remember when I moved to Tennessee, one of the big thing I got, kind of had the culture shock, is it was weird social stuff. They were very much like, oh, you're a Yankee, you talk nice, you talk different, what, and like they act like they were super country. And I'm like, dude, where I came from in Maine was like sticks. Like, you guys just have a southern drawl and you think you're more country.
The
like,
south of the north.
Yeah, so it's like I was way more country than you were, and I'm kind of astounded by how, I mean, I guess not specifically the politics, just some of the stuff that got through, like you mentioned with the COVID stuff. I mean, I guess maybe it is an older population, so I could see maybe how they could get away with a lot of that. But I don't know, my recollection of that state and the people is just some of the gun stuff. I'm just kind of curious, how effectively has that been? Do you think there's like a rural contingent that just kind of snub their nose and it's just like, no, we're not wearing masks. No, we don't give a damn about your gun laws. Or is it kind of not that? Like, is they're like a functional, these laws are basically non-functional in certain areas, is kind of what I'm getting at. Or I just, your thoughts roughly of the matter.
Yeah. I certainly think during the COVID lockdowns, if you went to, depending on what parts of the state you went to, you would see varying degrees of compliance. And I think, but I think probably as you go across America, that was somewhat true in the lockdown states, in the urban versus rural areas. And I certainly think that there is a very, very strong contingent of people who aren't going to care what the state's firearm laws are. They're not going to comply because, rightly so, it's a
Yeah.
constitutional right that shall not be infringed. And the state constitution even says it shall never be questioned. And yet every 2 years in the state legislature, it's up
It gets
for
questioned.
its questioned.
Yeah.
And this year, this has really been um, the Second Amendment. There's been a fight over the Second Amendment in Maine as long as I've been in politics, and I'm sure going on much, for a long time beyond then. But of course, my first term in 2015, I sponsored and we passed the constitutional carry law we have for the state. We were one of the first states to pass that. Um, and that was we passed that through a Republican-controlled Senate, but also through a Democrat-controlled House. We're still the only state to ever pass it through a Democrat-controlled chamber, and so that was kind of a real sign of, the Second Amendment in Maine is treated a little bit differently than a lot of other states in that it wasn't um, uh, it wasn't such a partisan issue. There were a lot of rural Democrats who were strong pro Second Amendment. But we've seen over the course of the last decade, Michael Bloomberg money coming more and more into the state, buying its way into Democratic politics. And I think we've gradually been seeing more of a realignment in the state among the Democrats getting more in line with kind of the national narratives on gun rights. And I think a lot of it is the influence of this Michael Bloomberg money. So this year, now there was a terrible shooting that a lot of folks are probably aware of that happened in Lewiston, Maine.
Oh yeah, the guy that's hearing voices and stuff. That guy, right? Or am I thinking?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
His
Yeah.
name was
Okay.
Robert Card, and
Yep.
he was troubled.
Yep.
He served in the military. Apparently, he had done a lot of explosive testing, which speaks to probably he had some traumatic brain injuries that was contributing to all this. Anyway, there was terrible shootings in Lewiston, Maine. There's still kind of an ongoing fact-finding commission about what happened there. But some interesting things that this commission has uncovered is that um, basically the government had sufficient legal tools in place to stop this guy, but those tools weren't utilized. So of course, what happens is all of the anti-Second Amendment crowd preys upon this as an opportunity to push their agendas all the same. Not to say, hey, we need more training for our law enforcement on how to use the laws that are already in place, but say, here are all of the anti-gun proposals we're dusting off. We bring every 2 years that have nothing to do with the circumstances of what happened, but we're going to work to push through all the same. So, for example, they pushed through a 72-hour waiting period law to purchase a firearm, which, of course, is completely unrelated to the events of what happened. The guy had a firearm for much longer than 72 hours. This wouldn't have changed anything, right? But they say this is about preventing suicide and things like that. I think their data doesn't really
Are private sales allowed in Maine?
Private sales are allowed.
Okay, well there goes that 72 hours. But
Right,
sorry, go ahead.
right,
Yeah, my point
but
just getting like a lot of these laws, it's like they don't really even function in reality anyways. So it's like
yeah,
if you put a 72-hour, okay, cool, then I'm gonna go to gunsnet.com and find some local dude who has the gun I want and buy it from him. But go on.
right.
Sorry.
Well, private sales are allowed, but then they also passed another law this go around that says that all advertised private sales must undergo a background check. So if you are advertising the sale and you're going to sell to someone, then you're going to have to go to an FFL dealer and do the sale there. And
So
also any transfer of a
sorry.
Oh,
I was just gonna say,
no,
so effectively it's banned because like that just means you have to literally know the guy or someone
yeah,
or hear word of mouth. But yeah, sorry, go on.
yeah. And then on top of that, they also passed a law that, um, you may be familiar with laws around, oh, what is it? Straw purchases, right?
Mhm.
If you knowingly purchase a firearm for a person who's prohibited to own a firearm, you would have committed a straw purchase, which is a crime, right?
Mhm.
But they're also changing that so it's not that you knew that they were a prohibited person. Now, if if you didn't know they were a prohibited purchase and you transferred a firearm to them, now now they've said you could be negligently guilty of this. So
Mhm.
they're basically establishing universal background checks through kind of backdoor mechanisms because the people of Maine pretty strongly rejected a Bloomberg-funded universal background check initiative on the ballot several years ago. And of course, maybe your audience doesn't is already knows all of this, but background checks are one of those things that sound really nice. But when you have basically a universal background check system where every single transfer of a firearm, there's a paper record of it. You're just one step away from gathering all those records up into a database system, and then you've got a gun registry,
Yep.
which is, you know, pretty dangerous to have, considering governments have a tendency to confiscate firearms from
Yeah.
people to suppress their liberties.
I mean, luckily we're in a country though that if they ever did get the registry, they'd go, "Oh shit!" But
They'd maybe they realize how outgunned they are.
yeah, like, I don't know. What should be slick about this one? I guess I don't know. I don't. I mean, even after COVID, I still struggle with the idea that we'll really ever see some sort of sweeping action like that. I mean, now as you mentioned with this registry thing and like with the background, it's like all they've cover every little other base to where now effectively they essentially have I mean, it's a registry, but they have background checks on everything essentially, even without actually having universal background checks. They may as well. The only way that you are avoiding that is by your cousin Larry having a gun that he's like, oh, you want to buy this off me for $100? Like literally, that's the only like basically examples like that. So
Yeah.
I mean, or you're gonna have to find really incognito ways to advertise your weapons you're selling. So yeah, that sucks.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing much ways around for people there. I don't know.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
and of course, none of these from the 72-hour waiting periods to the background check expansions to, by the way, the 72-hour waiting period is one of our most iconic businesses. Kittery Trading Post is talking about moving to New Hampshire now because of it, because it destroys their business model. But none of these would have had any impact on the tragedy that happened in Lewiston. Now, there was one proposal that came forward that would have directly addressed, um, something, and I thought potentially could have done something positive. But this was the one proposal that the Democrat-run Legislative Council blocked from coming forward, and it was a proposal to look at liability laws for private establishments that declare a gun-free zone and then do not have proper security to actually defend people in
Yeah.
the event that something like this happens, which was, of course, the case with in the areas where this tragedy happened. They were like 94% of all mass shootings in this country. They were gun-free zones, right?
Yep.
And in this case, it meant nothing more than there was a sign put up in a window that said, "Leave your firearms in the car. This is a gun-free zone." And of course, that didn't stop Robert Card from doing what he did. But I know for a fact, we've heard from family members of victims who had their firearms in their vehicles because they were obeying the gun-free zone policy, right? So
Mhm.
that just made it more dangerous for everyone. And
Yep.
but that's the policy we're not allowed to question. Instead, we
Mhm.
always need to be eroding our Second Amendment rights rather than asking ourselves the question, why were people disarmed in the first place? Why weren't they allowed to defend themselves?
Yep. Pro tip: concealed guns are concealed. Just saying that, people. Nothing makes me feel more free than carrying a gun in a gun-free zone. Depends on what it is, and that's not legal advice. Just saying. That's a
Well,
joke.
there was
Uh, for-
there was a case, I remember this was like a year or two ago, of like a guy who was carrying in a gun-free zone, but it was a mall. I don't remember what state this was in.
Mhm.
And someone came in and tried to commit a mass shooting, but that guy who was
Yeah. Yep.
illegally carrying, but thankfully he stopped him.
Well, I don't even think it's technically illegal. I mean, it might depend on the state. So it depends. Like, obviously, if you're going to like a courthouse, that's going to be like illegal in most states. But if you're going to like check your state laws, people, don't take my word for it. But I'm pretty sure private establishments that declare themselves as gun-free zones on their own, there's no like. All that means is if they catch you with a gun, they can ask you to leave, and then you have to leave. Because then at that point you'd be trespassing in a lot of states. That's my understanding. So that's why I'm saying, not legal advice. Check it, look into your state laws, but that's my understanding, at least in some states that I've been in. That it's just they can't it's because I remember there was discussion that came up with that is that it wasn't technically legal because everyone tried to make it out like he was breaking the law, and you're like, first off, that's a silly angle to take in the situation. Like him breaking the law saved everyone's life, so I don't think you're making the point you think you're making. But second off, it wasn't even really. I mean, I guess at that point, if he didn't leave once they asked him to, it'd be illegal. But it's my understanding it's not illegal for private establishments. But check your state laws. But anyways, I don't know if you have any more to say on that topic.
Well, no. So thank goodness for those who do concealed carry and protect their friends, their families, and their communities.
Yep, and always in the appropriate and legal places. Just saying. That was all joke before. But yeah, we do have a Second Amendment in this country, and concealed guns are concealed. But yeah. I did want to point out, you said they're doing a fact-finding thing. If you find anything on the sly with that Lewiston thing, send me some DMs. Send me some sneaky DMs. I don't know if you're allowed to or not, but there was a lot of weird stuff in that case. I remember I had some buddies who wrote some pieces on it. I don't remember all the details. I just remember a lot of weird stuff. And if you go down the schizo routes of stuff that I've gone down and the type of technology that the government has and things they've done, you're like, I mean, I'm not saying this could be some craziness, but it could be some craziness. That dude was hearing voices, and there was a lot of other weird stuff going on. So, I don't know, could just be a crazy dude, but there might be some weird stuff going on. I mean, because it wasn't like Australia had some event similar where they had some shooting. That's when their big sweeping gun laws went into place. And I think people looking at it later, and there's a lot of weird circumstances around it. I don't know enough to speak on that at large, but I just do remember people looked into it, and it sounds familiar. So governments do evil things. So we like to think they wouldn't do it in our own country, but they've definitely done it in other countries at the very least. So just saying, it's always a thing to keep an eye out, especially if you've studied things like I have in the show, like OKC, JFK. You start going, oh, there's some weird stuff in this world. But I guess it's just a matter of how deep does that rabbit hole go. I don't know. I did see recently, me and you kind of had an interaction over Dune. I kind of just want to know your backdrop of Dune. Are you like a Dune book nerd, or were you just kind of one who watched? Well, you're only a few years older than me, so it wouldn't even be the '84 movie. You're like, I think 3 years older than me. You're weirdly young for a politician.
I was the youngest state senator in America when I got elected. My wife and I watched the movies, both the recent movies and and some of the older movies when we were first dating. I think she read the books as she was growing up. I haven't read the books, but we own a copy of it, and we keep planning we're going to read it together, but we haven't gotten around to it. Okay. I don't know what was the Dune reference I did. I know I made a Dune reference on the floor of the Senate that got a chuckle from a lot of.
No, I remember we just had an interaction on social media. I don't remember what it was. I just posted about like it being really cool and blah, blah, blah. And then I think you mentioned something about the Harkonnen area and how that was really cool.
Oh, yeah. Oh, how they did the cinematography on the Harkonnen planet. Okay. I will say there was a big debate in the Maine Senate, just so people know the reference of what I was referencing. There was a big debate in the Maine Senate recently about whether to build a harbor or deep water port and also some windmills in this on this island with these sand dunes. And I just, I'm usually just a little bit of a troll in the Senate. And I just said, I'm not necessarily opposed to developing these dunes. After all, the spice must flow. So
you probably got a few chuckles from the people who read in there.
A few senators kind of got the joke. I got a chuckle, you know.
I mean, there's probably a handful of intellectual senators. I feel like most of them maybe not so much.
Well, I think the fact that the movie
Yeah.
movie was out right now was kind of peak people getting the joke. So
Yeah. I mean, even then though, even the movies, I feel like without having book knowledge, it's still kind of dense concepts and stuff, a lot of stuff going on. So I feel like you do kind of somewhat got to be a nerd, but maybe we're just in the age of the nerd to where it's kind of taken over. But yeah, I would highly recommend reading those books. They're really, really, really good. And I know if you're especially like into like things like political philosophy, history, even stuff like parapolitics and like how people subterfuge happens within like different factions. It is enthralling and it's really, really, really good stuff. And so I don't know how far they'll get into the movies into where the books go, because the books go like literally over the course of like thousands of years.
yeah.
So I don't really feel like they're going to go that nuts with
I heard
it.
they're
But I
doing
don't.
one more.
Yeah, the Messiah, I think. Which,
Yeah, this is the one they have. So I don't actually know what happens next. But
Yeah,
it's
no
like I
spoilers.
keep hearing there's like a emperor sandworm person.
Oh, that's way
So
off. That's like what are some of thousands of years. I
oh,
mean, it's
okay.
not really much of a spoiler because I don't think they'll ever get to it. I think they'll end with Paul's story. But Paul, the main character of these, he has a spoiler alert for everybody. He has kids, and then one of them becomes like fully embraces this like Messiah thing and like goes all the way, whereas Paul did not, and like lets himself become like one with the worms and becomes this emperor worm god and like as ultimate prescience and is literally like a human god that lives for thousands of years and like yeah, it's wild. It gets really really trippy, and he becomes like controls everything because he has ultimate prescience. Essentially, he's omniscient, borderline. So, yeah, it gets very out there in Dune pretty quick. I don't even know how they're gonna do the next movie with as weird as that movie itself or that book itself gets, but we'll see. Yeah, a lot of stuff in store for Dune fans and people just getting into it. But no, I found it interesting you were into that because it seemed like something you probably would have read or something. But yeah. Uh, there's one other thing I did want to talk to you about. I brought up a little before. I wanted to know if you'd followed at all the Kendrick Lamar or not Lamar, Kendrick and Drake beef, which sounds dumb for me to even say. The reason why, and you said you hadn't really at all. You didn't even think you knew who Kendrick was, which I respect that. I had honestly before this thing happened, had maybe heard like one or two tracks of Kendrick, and I was like able to recognize, oh, he's a talented guy. I know, but I wasn't like super interested to go look into his music or whatever. But and then Drake is who Drake is. I mean, I feel like you probably know who Drake is. I would assume.
It's like Drake from Drake and Josh. That Drake?
Drake Degrassi, like Degrassi
No,
Drake.
I don't know. I don't
The
know.
rapper.
I don't know these pop culture figures.
All right, well, Drake's kind of big. I assumed you might get that one. Yeah, because he's kind of been a big
Yeah.
superstar for a while. But yeah, they had this rap beef, and essentially, kind of the most latest, and it seems like it ended with Kendrick, within multiple songs, made lots of references implying there's a lot of crazy stuff going on in the industry. Lines along the line implying that essentially all of Drake's crew are pedophiles and that Drake himself is one. And so, kind of making like he made a Weinstein reference at one point, like kind of implying he's kind of like a Weinstein character. And then obviously there's this stuff with this Diddy stuff going on. A lot of people don't know when it comes to the records. The same guy that Diddy worked for, Universal UMG, I believe, is also the one who owns Kendrick and Drake. But the difference between Drake and Kendrick is Kendrick has a publishing deal, whereas they own Drake. They literally like everything, like basically all of his IP is theirs, and they are pretty early on in the contract. Whereas all that Kendrick has him do is put out his music. He owns everything else. He owns all his stuff. So this is kind of the dynamic we're working with. There is weird connections. I feel like there's heavy implications that maybe there's some Diddy kind of stuff going on. So for those, I mean, I don't know. You seem somewhat familiar with the Diddy stuff that happened recently, which essentially it's hip hop's version of Epstein. Is basically what it is. Like they have a lot of like it seems like sexual blackmail going on, underage stuff.
What's the evidence that's available? I've heard about this, but I don't. I haven't really been following it.
The evidence, I believe, the main thing most people are the evidence that people are picking at, and I haven't done a deep dive on this specific Diddy stuff. It's pretty I think it's pretty well established. I mean, not necessarily as fact, but that there is stuff out there. I believe that someone applied for a lawsuit or did a lawsuit, and so it's like stuff within the legal filings that have come out in there. Lots of accusations and a lot of stuff has been corroborated. He's had a lengthy. There's a lot of people who've done much better digging. I would recommend people go out there. I think the Cancel This Clothing Company guy has done a lot of good coverage on it, really digging into the actual like legal files and stuff. But it basically looks like there was some sort of Epstein stuff going on, essentially. Now, whether you want to say there was government influence or it was just that they'd use this to influence within their markets, to kind of be gatekeepers, to control the money, I'm of the opinion it's probably a little bit of both. I just, the reason why I wanted to bring up with you, because for one, I just thought it'd be funny to talk about a rap beef with Eric Brakey. But then two, I just kind of, it got me thinking when I was thinking about this, because the way that this is kind of dropping is Kendrick is dropping these stuff in verses. And I remember someone made a joke on Twitter or something about like, kind of wild to like out all your homies as pedophiles in a rap beef or whatever. And like kind of the idea that they're getting at is that like, why did you wait till now type deal? Like, why didn't you drop it? And I was thinking about it, like when you swim in certain circles and even circles that may have sinister forces in it, I feel like you probably, and I kind of equated it to, because I've been on Timcast a couple times, I've kind of become friends with some of the people in that sphere. And like, there's been this conversation, if you're terminally online recently, you probably know it. There was a big argument between Jake Shields and Tim Pool. And it's kind of the implication is a lot of people are making that Tim's owned by Israel or something. And like, I don't know, maybe he is. I kind of doubt it. I see nothing to prove it from the my vantage point, from the people I've interacted with. But it just kind of got me thinking, like, would I even know? And then what people would, like, at what level do you start seeing things? And so that kind of got me thinking with my conversation with you, like, and then on top of that, with that, like, there are certain levels where you may see things that are weird, but you're never really going to, like, say it out loud because you know the implication of those things and you may not have proof or, like, full proof. And then there's this weird dynamic. You sit on it for a while, you accumulate more. It's like, at what point do you drop? And so I think that's kind of what happened. Kendrick found his moment. And he's like, I have a lot of dirt. So it just kind of got me thinking with someone like you in a state level. Did you, I mean, like, obviously I know you're not going to give specifics or anything, but did you ever get like feelings like that like, there's some weird stuff going on, like vibes, little tales here, little tales there. Like, obviously I'm not saying you have like explicit dirt, but it's just like, kind of makes you wonder when some of these things, and what level. Obviously we know the federal government is completely entirely corrupt. And like, I feel like if you talk to anyone on a federal level of any note, if obviously they would lie when I ask them this question, but I would like, they in their back of their head they're like, yeah, I know some crazy stuff. But like, I feel like a state level you think probably not, but I'm just kind of curious. Like, I mean, I feel like there's got to be some sinister actors on state levels. Have you ever felt any weird stuff like that kind of deal? You know what I mean? Like, kind of hearing stories the grapevines, see this, why is this person acting that way, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's the typical thing of, I don't know, I mean, there's clearly like, someone's getting, donations to their PAC from a special interest group, and
Yeah.
hey, wouldn't you look, they've flipped their vote from how they used to vote on this issue.
Yeah.
I mean, those kinds of things happen. But as far as I think like some of the, I mean, I guess that's regular, that's
Yeah.
regular special,
That's like,
special,
that's
you
yeah, sort of
that's,
corruption.
yeah, that's just regular run of the mill corruption, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're all accustomed to. I mean, as far as kind of like some of the, I think what you talk about, kind of more sinister things, the stuff on the level of like what we see with Jeffrey Epstein and kind of these
Or
circles
even
of
like
power.
or even things like Russian collusion, how how that kind of got
Yeah.
strung up by the intelligence agencies, just stuff like that. I mean, it doesn't even have to be on the
Yeah.
realm of trafficking children. But sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, I
But
mean, I don't see that so much. I haven't personally seen that so much on the state level. Maybe it's partly I don't like really associate with other politicians outside of some of my kind of liberty colleagues.
right,
Outside of inside the state house. So I don't necessarily get to know people on perhaps a
yeah,
personal enough level to be like, wow, there's something very weird going on in their personal life. But I will say, I mean, I have seen very weird things, like when I was serving on the Republican National Platform Committee in 2016. I was was a national delegate to the convention, and I was one of 2 delegates representing Maine on the platform committee. And that year I was proud of a lot of things. Got in the platform, got a plank in to call for abolishing the IRS, got a plank in for right to try and nuclear energy, and a lot of other things. But what was particularly interesting was I asked that year to serve on the National Security Subcommittee because I wanted to fight with some neocons. And what was really weird was I opened up the draft platform, and through it there was just this language, this section that really kind of jumped out at me, and it was like calling for sending weapons to Ukraine to fight Russians. And remember, this is 2016, right? Now this is just 2 years after the coup in Ukraine, the Western-backed coup in the Ukraine, and the breakout of kind of civil war that was going on in the separatist regions, the Donbass region, because ethnic Russians were trying to kind of break away, and also were being persecuted, and they were being told kind of that by nationalists in the new government that they couldn't even speak their native Russian language. Anyway, there's a lot going on there. So anyway, I just looked at this. I didn't know all the background. I hadn't been, subject to or listening to, years of Scott Horton podcasts on the topic yet. But I just thought, boy, this seems like a really bad idea. Russia's still a nuclear power. What is our interest exactly? Why in the world are we trying to send? Were we saying in our Republican platform we're going to send weapons over there? That seems very provocative. I thought, Ronald Reagan did a pretty good job of trying to keep us out of a hot war with nuclear Russia. Maybe we should respect that and find the wisdom in that. Anyway, so I called for striking that out of the platform completely, which kind of led to a big blow up on the floor of the platform committee. And eventually someone from Trump's team came in and said, actually, we don't like how harsh this language is there. And so they wanted to soften the language, saying we're going to send aid, not necessarily lethal weapons, though Trump did go on to send lethal weapons
You could
into
define
Ukraine.
that as aid.
Yeah. Actually, when he tried not to send weapons, they impeached him over it. So
yeah, aren't they trying that with Biden right now over Israel? I saw that as a thumbnail name. I mean, maybe you're not as tapped into it. I haven't read anything on it.
Yeah.
I know there was some statement by Biden that I haven't looked into enough, saying something along the lines of preventing weaponry, any more weaponry or aid or whatever going to Israel if they invade Rafah. The only thing I saw is some thumbnail for Tim Pool's show when I pulled up my YouTube, and I didn't look at it, so I don't know. It just said something along the lines of Republicans preparing to impeach him, which I guess, like, sure, if you played a stupid left-right game, you could be like, hell yeah, that's right, you impeached our president over trying to give weapons to somebody, and now we're gonna do the same to you. But it's just like, I don't know, next level stupid. I mean, I get it. APAC has bought the hell out of all those guys mostly, but still, like, Jesus, like, I don't know. That's just so blatantly, like, it's literally the same exact thing. Like, how are you going to really, bitch and moan about this happened to Trump and then really push? I mean, once again, I'm not sure what the prepping is. I just saw a thumbnail. So if that is the case, I'm like, Jesus, no way. Like, how are people that tone deaf? They're like, we're going to do literally the exact same thing that happened to the last president, and because we want to fund this war so bad. You're like, what? What? I don't know. I don't have any thoughts. I don't know if you've tapped into the most latest on that.
There are no principles in politics on the national level, certainly, and it has been very disappointing. It's been very disappointing to watch kind of Congress all around. I mean, how they've just been over backwards for war, including many Republicans who I think got their heads screwed on straight, or started to anyway, to some degree when it comes to Ukraine. But when it comes to Israel, it's just there's a lot of influence there, and certainly when you see that, like someone like Congressman Thomas Massey votes against sending our money over to Israel to continue, the government there kind of waging this war and all that.
Now hate
That
Jews.
right. Well, right. The slurs that come out against him
Yeah.
And they're launching like what did I see, like 300,000. They're launching like a targeted campaign against him for his reelection, right? This is how yeah, I mean this is what we call kind of, confrontational politics, right? You whack legislators who don't do what you want, right?
Hmm.
And it's just how unions operate. This is how I think many of us on the right had to learn how to operate to pass things like constitutional carry. But at least all of those were arguing and were fighting over interests within America. This is a foreign interest. This is the interest of a foreign government, and it is frankly, it's alarming. I think that any foreign government seems to have so
Yeah.
much influence in our own nation's capital. Frankly, foreign governments should not be able to lobby our legislators. They should have to go to the State Department and work through there. That's the avenue for foreign governments being able to interface with our government. But
Hmm.
but yeah, no, it seems like a lot of foreign governments seem to have more influence over our legislators than the people that they represent.
Yeah, I mean, this Israel thing's been like, I don't know, it's just been that on display. Obviously, a lot of people, and I'm one of them. I admit, I mean, I mentioned at APAC and stuff. There is a special hold Israel has, but it does apply to other countries as well. And it's just like it puts it on full display that like I don't know, throughout this whole ordeal, what the Biden administration's been like, hey, you guys need to like chill. Like, I don't know, that might have been debatably a war crime you just did. Can we like chill? Like, and with never giving any sort of actual substantive like, hey, if they don't do this, we'll do this. And it's the first time they've literally done anything other than to give verbal, please stop doing that. After they bombed
Yeah.
an Iranian embassy, like after, I mean, what 30,000 I think are dead, and I don't even know if that, I don't even think it's even a third of those are Hamas, even by the best figures. So it's just like I don't know. At what point do you just like? I mean, what it's one thing you can argue whether who's right starting what or this, but at the very least, it's like, do we really need to have our hands in this blood? Like I don't really understand the
Yeah.
purpose of that. So like if Israel wants to carry on some sort of essentially whatever they want to call that, like, okay, do it on your own dime. Like, and even that's pretty evil at this point, in my opinion. So I don't know. It's just something
Yeah.
else.
And it's sad that all three major choices for president are
Yep.
fundamentally on the same page when it comes to Israel. There
Mm-hmm.
isn't even really a choice there. And I love the Jewish people, love the people of Israel, love the people of Palestine. Um, but it's not our fight.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think certainly our involvement over there, I think it has
Aggravates it.
it, yeah, it aggravates it. It has removed the incentives for the people
Yeah.
there to figure out how to live together in peace.
Yeah, we remove incentive for peace by being the bully in the corner that will come in and back Israel no matter what they do.
Yeah, yeah,
So I mean, it's just, and that's not to say Hamas does is great. It's just that like, this is the social dynamic we've created where they have no real reason to pursue peace. The Israel has no incentive for it, and as a result, the Hamas or Palestinians or whatever are essentially left with very little options. I'm not at all advocating the violence, but I mean, a lot of people I think there was the peaceful protests. Well, I can't remember what time period that was. A lot of them died, but it's just sad. But yeah, that actually made me think. You brought up the candidates. I guess I just kind of wanted to get your take. I think I know it, and a lot of people know me. I'm not like I was like talked a lot about actors back then. I still believe all that. I just don't really care to talk about it a lot anymore because like I have other interests. So I'm like not really the political action guy. I'm more like kind of like counter economics, that type of stuff. But I see a lot of people this move that happened with the LP, their convention coming up. They put out a letter to, I believe, RFK, Trump, and Biden. And now, at this point, I believe RFK has agreed, Trump has agreed to come to the convention. And from the get go, there were so many people who were haters. And I'm someone who's had many critiques. I literally said I'm basically kind of like a voting's fake and gay. Like, why bother? Like, that's kind of where I'm at. So, like, I don't, like, but I try to call balls and strikes when I see them. And this one, I was like, I don't really see the harm. As long as like they aren't like filleting Trump and all these guys when they come. As long as they're like giving them fair and all, like pushback or whatever, not just letting them use them, which I never ever thought they would. every one of these people are going to use this as their moment to grandstand for Trump in whatever way they see fit to, boost their political profiles, these people at the LP. So I just don't see it being a bad thing. I did want to add, too, there's the additional thing where I guess Vivek is now coming, too. And apparently he's going to debate whoever the VP candidate becomes that day, which a lot of people know, which I thought was pretty cool. I'm pretty sure that means my buddy, my co-host on Tower Gang, may very well be debating Vivek at the LP because he's running for VP in the LP. So, I mean, I don't know. That's pretty cool. Literally a member of Tower Gang debating Vivek. So, all right. Well, that's the world we live in. For those who aren't aware, Tower Gang is my offensive comedy show. But yes, that's a very, very, we've made a lot of Indian jokes, and now he's going to be debating him. So this will be interesting. To be fair, Vivek has a good sense of humor, has made a lot of Indian jokes himself. So
Yeah.
But anyways, what I'm getting at, just kind of your thoughts. I mean, I'm generally assuming you're kind of the same wavelength, but I just know there's been a lot of people that have been kind of mauling about, oh no, what does this mean for the LP? As if it's a bad thing. I mean, don't get me wrong, I make critiques of the LP, but this ain't one of them,
Yeah. I've discussed this on a few programs the last couple of days. I think it is a sign that the libertarian movement and the Libertarian Party account for a chunk of votes that that they feel the need they've got to work for, and I think that's a very powerful place for the liberty movement to be. So, Donald Trump is not a libertarian. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is not a libertarian. Though let's also be fair that some of the nominees for the Libertarian Party in the past have not been libertarians. I remember hearing Bill Weld speak at PorcFest several years ago and grilling him on where he stood on red flag laws. And I remember walking away feeling like he supported red flag laws. And he was the nominee for VP under the Libertarian Party. So, we are very rarely, I think, as libertarians, do we have a choice for president who is both a perfect libertarian or someone who's perfect enough, right? Like a Ron Paul type figure, and who also has a credible electoral path to winning. We can always register a protest vote and vote for the Libertarian Party candidate. And that's ultimately what that is. It's a protest vote. I've registered many protest votes in the past when I've been choosing between a neoliberal and a neoconservative. It's easy for me to register a protest vote. I wrote in Ron Paul in 2012 because I did not want to vote for Mitt Romney or Barack Obama. But I think our power as voters within this republic comes from being voters who are hard to get, but not impossible to get. If we are impossible to get voters, then Donald Trump and RFK and all of these kind of figures who could theoretically, conceivably be the next president, either one of them could be. If we're impossible to get, they're not going to come to us. They're not going to care about our issues. They're not going to try to appeal to things that matter to us on tangible, substantive things. But you have Robert F. Kennedy Jr. talking about pardoning Julian Assange and at least looking into Ross Ulbricht and pardoning Edward Snowden. I think it's fair to ask Donald Trump, like, where are you on those things? What are you going to do on the wars? What are you going to do on? I mean, I think this is a great opportunity to take these two figures and say, you want our votes. Well, here are the tangible liberty policies we want for individuals to consider voting for you as a lesser evil, or maybe even a lesser good. So I always go back to, I think, good advice by Morton Blackwell, who's the leader of an organization called the Leadership Institute. And Morton Blackwell's been around for a long time. He was once upon a time the youngest national delegate for Barry Goldwater. But he says there's two ways to try to achieve political change through our electoral systems. We can wait for the day where we get all of the right people who believe all of the good things elected into a majority of all of the positions in government, and then they'll change everything to be good and righteous and wonderful. But of course, That's never going to happen because government by its nature attracts power seekers, not liberty lovers, right? So there's a disproportionate pull towards the worst people to get into these positions. So we can wait to get all the right people elected, or we can work to shape the political environment around the wrong people to make it politically expedient for them to do the right thing. Oh, I want to get reelected, and all of these voters who I need, all of these swing voters are telling me I need to pardon Julian Assange and Ross Ulbricht. I need to put an end to the war in Ukraine. Maybe I need to reconsider how vociferously we're putting weapons and aid into this war in Palestine. I think those are legitimate kind of issues that libertarians care about, that we can use our leverage to try to get concessions on. So I think that that's powerful and valuable. And I will say this about Donald Trump is one of the things I liked most about Donald Trump was just how influenceable he in fact was by people like Senator Rand Paul, who seemed to be every other day to be out golfing with him, telling him, whispering in his ear, you do not want to start a war with Iran. Don't let John Bolton talk you into this. And wouldn't you know it, at the last possible moment, he walked away from it. So I'm not saying that Donald Trump is a libertarian or RFK is a libertarian or that people should vote for either of these people. I'm saying, it's worth considering and worth asking yourself, is there anything here to further the cause of liberty that we can kind of extract with the leverage that we have?
What you're saying is the key to get what you want from Trump is you're smart, you're beautiful, don't bomb people. You're smart, you're beautiful, don't bomb people. Just pat the head over and over again. And you know what? It's true that he was like that, which I always thought that was bizarre how crazy the Democrats acted while they were in. And, for one, they got a lot, like the establishment got a lot of what they wanted while Trump was in. And if the establishment just learned to work with him better, and just really talk. And some of them tried, just didn't do it very well. They could have gone a lot more out of him. Like we could have had a way worse situation with Trump if the opposition just learned how to manipulate him. He would have loved to have been embraced by Democrat voters, but they had to make him the boogeyman from day one. I did want to just kind of one final comment on the upcoming convention. I did find it, it makes me think of, I don't know if you ever saw the podcast Dave did with RFK, where the one with Israel. That's what it makes me think of. You brought the point that all three of them are Israel. It's like, all right, I know they're probably not going to debate or anything, so it's going to be more speeches, but it's like, I don't know, I guess say we, I'm not even an LP guy, but if just like there are good people there that show up and give good speeches, like these are things that are going to be elevated by association with Trump, RFK. I know Biden won't be there, Vivek will be there. So these are going to be gripes that will be able to get elevated, and maybe things that they are on some small level forced to account for, at least in messaging or something. Or at least lie. I don't know. I just think there's something to that. And I think, there are these moments every now and then where that, you really can hammer someone on this if you catch them in the right thing. Hell, we talked about the Kendrick Drake beef. We got, you talk about like like I said, Dave and RFK. It's like you catch someone at the right moment and you can make magic happen. Heck, we had the Ron Paul moment with Giuliani. So it's like, these moments happen sometimes, and if you kind of set them up, sometimes it just works out just right. And I think that could be something you're dealing with there. And while it doesn't mean I support the LP at large, I'm like, I think this could be cool. There could be something here. There's been a lot of talk about Dave doing some sort of debate or something with RFK. I think even RFK may have called for it, if I recall correctly. I forget.
I think RFK called for a debate with Donald Trump.
There you go. Yeah, and then everyone tried to jump. That's what it was.
Yeah,
so it's like, I don't know if
Donald Trump is not going to agree to a debate with RFK.
He's not. But the
RFK needs to ask. He needs to. It's a good.
Yeah,
it's a
the
good,
LP might be able to leverage that into something else. Although I feel like RFK would be smart enough to not do that with Dave again. So I don't know. We'll see. All right, one last question before I get here. Short one. What's your most offensive politically offensive parapolitics belief? Like, so by that would be something along the lines of, say I said RFK though I didn't even mean to, but obviously you have RFK Jr.'s dad, so there's that. Like, do you think Sirhan killed them? Do you think Israel's responsible for 9/11? Like, what's your most offensive pair of politics? Do you think the government did OKC? What is your one that like would get you the most grief? You're on your way out, you may as well drop a bomb.
Yeah. I don't know which conspiracy theory I've privately held that I'm ready to
not even
admit.
privately. I mean, I'm sure
I
that
don't
you
know.
talk about a lot of these publicly. I'm just curious which one you think's the one that's most breaks normies' minds that you would hold disbelief. I mean, obviously, I would assume you probably think that CIA killed JFK, or more likely did. I don't
Probably.
know. Yeah,
I also Abraham Lincoln was a tyrant. How about that?
that's a good one. That's a really good one. A lot of people don't really follow that one. Don't really know that one.
You know, he was.
Yeah, and
You
you know
just
what's
read
crazy?
just read The Real Lincoln by
Yeah, but
uh,
Buchanan? No, not
what's that?
Buchanan. I was trying to finish. I can't remember the author.
Thomas
De
D.
Lorenzo. I
Lorenzo.
don't know why I thought it was Buchanan. Buchanan did the World War II book. I don't know why. It's kind of I was thinking history revisionism.
You know, here's I will just say, on that note, here is a moment in history that I think really kind of illustrates the point what you've asked me, the admission you've asked me for about how I feel about Abraham Lincoln. Francis Scott Key, author of the Star Spangled Banner, right? He wrote the Star Spangled Banner. I forget the name of the fort that he was in, but as America was being invaded by the British, and he's in that fort, in that battle, and seeing the flag is still there over that fort, that America is still America. The British have not, toppled our country that so many had fought to establish. Is it 2 generations later? His grandson is a newspaper editor in Maryland. And the Lincoln administration has suspended habeas corpus, and Maryland is part of the Union. It has not seceded, but is a border state. And they've suspended so many rights of people in these border states. And so Francis Scott Key's grandson writes an editorial criticizing the Lincoln administration for their suspension of people's rights in Maryland. And he's arrested for it. And where is he imprisoned? He's imprisoned in the exact same fort his grandfather wrote the Star Spangled Banner. I think it is a great moment of just historical irony. And anyway,
Yep.
I'll leave it there.
Hell yeah. Lysander Spooner was of the opinion he was a slavery abolitionist, and he was of the opinion the South should have been able to secede. And I would say I do find it funny. Last time I even touched on this conversation about this sort of stuff, Civil War stuff, even just the tiny bits. That's a lot. I think that's the last time I got a strike. And all I said was maybe. I think what I said was I have a little bit more sympathy for the South than a lot of people might think. Especially coming from the North originally. And I said maybe it wasn't as simple as what's his face, as Lincoln was the hero of the story and Booth was the devil. Like, not saying that either of them fit perfectly into one or the other archetype, but I don't think it was as simple as that. And that got me a strike. So we're still the time where you really can't talk crap about the Civil War.
Yeah. Well, America was the only kind of industrialized country in the world that needed to fight a war to abolish slavery. In fact, the federal government could have purchased the freedom of every single enslaved person in America, and it would have cost less than the cost of the Civil War itself. And certainly we would have been spared all the bloodshed that many states like Maine never fully recovered from.
Yep, and I'm of the opinion too. It wouldn't have been economically viable. So if they had just let them secede and let them continue their practices, it wouldn't have worked for much longer, because it's really not a very economically viable process. Thing, whatever. I couldn't think of the word. But all right, I'm gonna let you go, Eric. Kept you a little bit longer than I meant to. Let people know where they can find you at. Kind of what you're doing these days, et cetera, et cetera.
You can find me at you can find me on X at Senator Brakey. You can learn about the Free State Project at fsp.org. You can also come to Pork Fest, which you should check your calendar, Jose. I know that it's you got a lot going on, as you say, but it's June 17th through the 23rd at Rogers Campground in beautiful Lancaster, New Hampshire. Ron Paul is going to be doing an address to everyone there. He's coming in virtually, but then we're going to have 2,000 of your favorite libertarians, including Jack Hunter, Gene Epstein, Jeffrey Tucker, James Bovard, David Friedman, Spike Cohen, and so many more. If you've never been to PorcFest, it's the Libertarian Burning Man. You got to experience this. Come see what it's like to live free in a thriving pop-up liberty community for 1 week, and it's not to be missed. So we'll get you up here one day, Jose, and for your audience, I hope they will join us in June.
Yeah, one of these days. I do recommend it. I have a lot of friends who've gone and had a lot of fun, so I would recommend it. It's just on the opposite side of the country for me. So, yeah, I do appreciate your time. I do want to let you guys know that today's episode was brought to you by Nado Shave Co. Big Shave has been siping the American people for decades with their multi-blade razor scam. Get rid of that razor burn, irritation, and ingrown hairs by using those multi-blade nonsense. Go back to traditional stuff. It's cheaper. It's better for you. It's all around. Just do it. I mean, it's what I think it's $70, $75 allows you to shave for an entire year. That gets you one traditional safety razor and 100 stainless steel blades. So depending on how long you do it, that can last even longer. I know I've made mine stretch for forever. I don't even think I've gone through one little tiny box of blades. But yeah, that's at nadoshaveco.com. Use Jose at checkout for 10% off your entire order. And with that, we are out. Like, share, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. Follow me on Twitter at TowerGangJose. We out.